listening to the Art of Homeschooling podcast, where we help parents cultivate creativity and connection at home. I'm your host, Jean Miller, and here on this podcast, you'll find stories and inspiration to bring you the confidence you need to make homeschooling work for your family. Let's begin. Hello, and welcome to episode 74 here on the Art of Homeschooling podcast. And today you are in for a treat because I have a guest. In this episode, I'm talking with Eshanne Anderson, a fellow traveler on this homeschooling journey, and we are talking all about inner work, that elusive practice of taking time for ourselves to fill back up. Inner work is really more than that. It's having a look inside and seeing where we can be more loving, more patient, more courageous. But I'm getting ahead of myself here because we're going to talk about all those things today. So first, let me introduce you to Eshanne. Hello.
Hi. Oh, it's so nice to be here today, Jean, my friend.
It's so great to have this conversation. So just a quick background, I'm going to give a little bio here on Eshanne, and then we're going to dive into a really rich conversation. So Eshanne is a homeschooling mother of two primary school children. Many years ago, before falling in love with Waldorf education, she taught as a second grade teacher in a small private school and also taught acting at night for the fun of it at a local college. Her academic background in religious studies has helped pave the ground for her love of exploring inner work. Her true love and passion is deeply investing in tremendous humans and helping them along on their own inner growth path. She equally enjoys traveling to the mountains or big cities and is always ready to lead the way into frivolity or general anarchy. I love that. When not dreaming of long adventures or doodling with words and pictures, she is adoring her hilarious husband and beautiful children and making a home that welcomes her friends and family to stay and laugh and sing a while. Eshanne is a homeschooling mother, poet, photographer, and all-around creative. She's a presenter at the summer Taproot teacher training. Wonderful. Woo! And is offering inner work conversations through my Inner Work Journey program this spring. And you can follow her over on Instagram at Eshanne.
That all sounded so nice.
That's you.
Me? Wow. That's
you, my friend.
Yeah. Hi. Thanks for having me today. Nice to be here with you. Nice to just with people and humans and chatting. It's been such a strange time.
Such a strange time. Yeah, I think just that feeling when we have so much extended time of feeling uncertainty and feeling so unsettled. It's challenging. So this is a great place to start. Like, let's do just this radical check-in because it for me, I'm finding like when I think about what my daily practices are in these crazy times, it is so hard to focus. Like I find that my periods of concentration are shorter. And sometimes my inner work is just like a moment curled up with our dog Gus on his beanbag chair. Seriously, sometimes that's the extent of it. So what about you?
Yeah, I think I have the attention span of a gnat right about now. It's so small. It's so small. And I have so little patience really for myself. And then obviously that transferred to my partner and my children. I feel so often over the past few years disconnected from myself. I feel disconnected from my community, from my intimate relationships, even within my own home, which is so strange, right? Because we're all spending so much more time together than we used to. And yet I'm finding it really, really hard to connect. And that always goes back to, it's a signal for me that I'm having a hard time connecting with myself. It's not about my relationships. It's not about my children. It's not about my dog or whatever is going on in the world. It's about, am I able to connect with myself? And sometimes, honestly, over the past years, I'm so exhausted of myself. I don't want to. I don't want to connect with myself. And then I have to remember that that's okay too. And really to have some grace for that. Because I think that the past few years has been hard on everyone. I mean, there's got to be comedy sketches about it somewhere, that how's it been? Well, it's been hard, it's been real hard. It's one of those things that it's even difficult to articulate because everyone's experience, I think, has been so personal. It's universal, kind of like childbirth, right? All these women go through it. We're not alone in that. It's universal, and it's also very unique. So I think that everyone's experience over the past few years is somewhat universal and very, very unique. We've all had opportunity for these transformative experiences, which are really kind of ugly and difficult to talk about.
Yeah. And yet I think it's so important to have these conversations, right? Because that's what makes me feel more like human, and more okay with myself, more okay having the attention span of a gnat. When I share that, right, I do somehow then, I connect with you, and then I can connect back to reconnect back with myself somehow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I find that all my friendships are being renegotiated, as we all kind of are entering back in, because, I'm not the same person that I was 2 years ago. You're not the same person. We've all changed, and it's awkward. It's hilarious. So we started going to this little homeschool meetup on Fridays, right?
Mm-hmm,
and first of all, it's not bad enough that they're all homeschoolers, right? There's this social awkward thing. But then most of the I've been around a lot of other kids over the past 2 years. Ours haven't, most of them haven't. So it's a 2-hour meetup, and it's at a different park every week. And it's hilarious watching these kids, because for the first 45 minutes to an hour and a half, they're really standing at different spaces in the park, staring at each other, doing nothing. And it's so awkward and it's so uncomfortable. And as a parent, you're kind of laughing because we're sitting on blankets kind of doing the same thing with the moms or the dads, we're all relearning how to connect. And is it safe? Is it, asking ourselves all these questions? And then, the half hour before it's time to go, everybody starts playing and finally remembers their rhythm, remembers their strides, but it's awkward. It's just really awkward.
Yeah.
I think that's been my motto for the past few years, and really making some peace with that, of saying, it's going to be awkward, and that's okay. Gosh, that's okay.
And that making peace with whatever is, just that sense of acceptance. It's somehow I feel like I've been breathing more shallowly even, right? And somehow when we can when we can sink into acceptance, it just brings the breath a little deeper, and helps us to relax, right?
Absolutely.
So to be able to accept what is, and then release our upset or anxiety or whatever about the thing that is.
Yeah. Yes. I think that if we could have our family, I'm speaking for us specifically, I think kind of early on in the pandemic time, we kind of had a motto. This is the thing that we've leaned into through this whole time. And it's to slow down, to allow, and then to stay connected. It's those are our 3 points of kind of like you're saying, being able to breathe. It's just simply slowing down. So if we find we're hitting a bump during the day, the first thing we think about is, hey, how can we slow down? The next thing is then to just make space for whatever it is that comes up. And then to try to stay connected, first of all, to ourselves, to the divine, to each other. And so I think if that's the one really good thing that's come about through all this time like we have that small little rhythm really ingrained in each of us. Our daughter will flip out and have something happen, and my son will come rushing in the room, and he's like, hey, can we just slow down for a minute? Can we just slow down? And then, and when you hear it being reflected in your, 10, 11, 12-year-olds, you're like, all right, this is the thing. It's a thing. And it's a good thing,
It's a thing.
It's a thing. We're really doing it. So I feel like, there's not many things during these past years that we could kind of hang our hat on and say, you know what, this is good. We did that. But I think that finding those tiny little glowing things, those little moments of, someone might have really excelled at art during this time, where I don't know what those things are, but to take those little glowing moments and put them in a jar and light your way with it, that we do have these little moments, these special little times. And for us, that's been it.
Yeah.
We've really learned how to slow down.
I love that. Put it in a jar and let it guide you, lead the way. It is in a funny way, a paradox almost. Like there is a silver lining that if it all is crazy and uncertain, then we get to really decide what's most important, right? We get to really decide what it is. Like there's a sort of a silver lining at this crazy time, that we can be more gentle with ourselves, and we can be more intentional about that slowdown.
Yeah. And we can't control anything. I think that for me, that's sort of, I've gotten stuck in a really weird rut lately of that. Nothing is certain. There's absolutely nothing that's certain in this world, right? We can't. So how do you hope for something that's not certain, that you can't? And I feel like I've been kind of like in a little bit of a limbo space lately, trying to just really wrestle with that construct, because impermanence is the thing. Like I am fully aware of the world's impermanence currently, in my own impermanence, right? And then how do I also find hope?
Yeah.
Because there is, it's a funny little pickle.
It's such a pickle. And so in our family, my kids are grown, right? And they now all live in different, we represent all 4 time zones in the US now. So 3 kids and us, and we're each in a different time zone. And so there was no way to know that when our youngest moved last September after graduating from college, that I wouldn't see her, I mean, we didn't know when we would see her. And it's such a, meeting on Zoom is it's just so different. It is not how humans, do the human to human thing. So it can work, I think, when we really do the what we're talking about, where we can really tap into our deepest selves and our hopes and dreams. When we can do that, then we can make those connections. But man, it is not easy.
It's not. It's really not. This particular time, but it all comes back to connecting with yourself. When you connect with yourself,
okay, so let's talk about that. Like how do you define inner work?
Fancy, you should ask that question. I think it's a trick question, honestly. I think it's a little unfair in some ways. I don't think that it's different for everyone, but so for myself, I think inner work is turning your head 3 degrees to the right. And it's 2 things. It's either turning your head 3 degrees to the right and being able to connect with yourself, or to close your eyes and you turn your head 3 degrees to the left and connect with the divine. And obviously it can be God, silence, or nature. We're equal opportunity divinity here. But I think that it's one of those 2 things. And how you go about that, that's the beauty. You get to go about that in whatever way suits you the best, whatever way that you're finding that is bearing fruit. And that's going to be different for everyone. And you're going to know that you're getting somewhere with inner work by either one of 2 things. Connection, what we're talking about, like connection either with yourself or the divine, that you can really feel that, or discomfort. I think that that's the other signal, the light post that says, hey, you've arrived. If you're finding some sort of discomfort, I think that the discomfort comes from the work part of inner work, of being brutally honest with yourself about what you observe inside of yourself. And first, like we were talking about, allowing for it, making space for it, and then holding it with tenderness and kindness. Yeah. So the discomfort, there's something really good on the other side of the discomfort, but I think that it's a really important part of the journey in order to for growth, for change, for all the good stuff, all the fruit that you'll know inner work because of the fruit, like I was saying, you're lucky you're going to start to see it bearing fruit, dancing and beauty and poetry and all the things that make you happy, hopefully that elusive thing called joy, that's going to be the end of it. Hopefully, is that you'll get some joy, but that, connection, comfort are what you need to look for. And it's really cool. And you get to do it in whatever way works for you. And I think we can talk a little bit more about that, but
I love that. And for me, my first go-to for describing inner work to another is just getting quiet, right? Like we have to get quiet long enough to be able to do what you're saying, right? To connect inward, to connect outward. I have this analogy, this little image for myself that I created years ago, that my job is keeping the windows clean, which means that I want there to be able, my inner spark to connect with something bigger than myself, whatever you want to call it, divine, God, whatever it is, but that I want to do daily practices just to keep those windows clean so that connection can exist or reconnect, right? Because it does sometimes get cloudy. It does sometimes get sort of covered over. And
and it's okay. It's okay to lose connection with yourself. It's okay to lose connection with God. It's a relationship. It's okay to lose connection with your kids. It's okay to lose connection with your partner for a little while. What's important is that you remember to once again turn your head 3 degrees to the left or 3 degrees to the right and reestablish that connection. And usually a lot of times for me, it starts with an apology, like, dear God, I'm so sorry. I've gotten so wrapped up in my own vanity or my own whatever, or I'm so interesting, or I'm so smart, or I can do this and do that. Or, oh, hey, partner, my husband's name is Jason. Hey, Jason, I'm sorry, but I seem to have forgotten that you are important and that I love you and how much I value you. Oh, hey, kid. I got worried about that I didn't have a good relationship with my mom. And, I found that after my kids went through the 9-year change and they popped right outside of that little bubble, like you and your kids before the 9-year change, you are together in that bubble. And when 9 hits and they pop themselves out, they're still attached to your bubble, right? But they're right outside of your bubble. I found that I had such a difficult time connecting with my kids, because I was scared. I didn't have a great relationship with my mom, and there's no map for how to go forward with each other in this whole living life situation. And so I found that funny thing, all I want is connection with my kids. And of course they're going to want to connect with me, right? That's really natural to most people. But for people who didn't have a good relationship with their parents, that is just not obvious. And so my over the past few years is to learn to, again, going back to slowing down and stay connected, is to slow down. It's just to continue to slow down and turn my head 3 degrees towards my kids and say, I'm going to get it right. And I don't really know how to do this, but I'm committed to continuing to connect with you. And it starts with a lot of apologies, because I don't get it right, because I don't know. And I'm learning along the way. And we are learning together. And I am learning. I am taking steps. I am finding out what works and what doesn't work and making changes along the way. I'm writing a new map. And they are watching me do it. And I'm giving them the skills to know how to effectively create change and how to slow down. They see me desperately trying to connect with myself. And that's what matters, is that we're doing the work of it, and that we're trying, we're efforting, a better word would be endeavoring. We are endeavoring to connect to ourselves, trying to connect to the ground, to the earth, to our breath, to each other. And we don't have to get it right all the time. We can get it wrong. We can get it wrong sometimes, but we continue to try and reconnect, reestablish.
Such a good word. Yeah. Reestablish the connection. Endeavoring. I love that word. Words are special, so special to me. I always pick a word of the year. And last year, interestingly, from this conversation, so in 2021, my word was allow. And now in 2022, my word is tend. And there's so many versions of that, like tender, tenderness, tending.
Yeah.
And so I've been playing with this image of spring is coming, right? And it's muddy. We have mud season here in northeastern Ohio. So it snows and then melts and it's muddy. And the snowdrops are coming up right now through the mud. And so this idea, there's a wonderful quote from Thich Nhat Hanh, who said, "No mud, no lotus." We can't have the flower and the blooming and the blossoming without the mud. And so what you're describing to me is so real, that accepting that, instead of trying to get rid of the mud and the mess and the muck, right?
Yeah.
Accepting it and then tending in the most tender way to the little green shoots, and which are ourselves always, no matter how old we are, or how long we've been doing this. I think we're all for varying reasons rewriting the map.
Yeah. And I think that, like you're saying, that the mud is part of the journey. It really is. The dirt is part of the journey. The discomfort is part of the journey. And that if we show our children us only hitting these perfection marks, that we're robbing them of what the reality of what their journey is going to be. Their journey is going to have a lot of mud. It's going to have a lot of dirt. And you want that. It's got all the good bacteria. It's got the good soil. It's got all the good stuff, the discomfort, and being able to look in a mirror. You're giving them the gift of being able to look in a mirror and say, I don't like that. And I'm going to take that thing that I don't like, and instead of like putting it away from myself and telling it it's bad and it's wrong, but then I'm going to take that thing and then I'm going to hold it with tenderness. I'm going to hold it with deepest care. I'm going to say, I love this part of myself, even though it's ugly, because we all have these ugly parts, we disown them and we say, oh, I don't have that. No, I don't have that. But we all do. And everyone else sees those parts. And the great thing about friendship and community and connection is that they love us anyway. They love us despite our flaws, our good friends, our good people, our humans, our family. And they say that they make space for it. They allow for it, right? And we all try, and we want to grow, we want to change. And that you can't do that by putting something out to pasture. You have to pull it into the fold and love it, and just really treat it with the most tender care. And then it just naturally transforms. That's the cool part. It's like the work. I think the hardest work is just taking that thing that's that mud and saying, it's mine. This is part of me. The transformation part just happens all on its own. I mean, that part unfolds, the unfolding of the lotus, the unfolding of the flower, and that it just happens like spring every year. And that we have to rest, we have to work, we have to toil, just like the seasons, to be able to have a new unfolding every year, that we get to do this. Always a new chance. There's always an opportunity for growth.
And we can always start again. I just love this idea, the little encapsulated idea that you were describing of loving ourselves into the transformation. Because, so I want to talk about how, my question is, how has inner work changed for you over the years? And for me, I would say that in those early years, I tried to force it, right? It was from the perspective of, oh, this is supposed to make me a better person, so I'm going to do this thing, right? And that's
I could give you a whole list of what inner work is not, right? And it's not control, right? If you're trying to control something and it's not working, it's just let that go. That's not inner work. It's not virtue signaling. It's not like, oh, let me get out my journal so everyone can see me journaling,
Right.
It's not.
And it does not come with a sense of urgency either.
No. Well, it comes sometimes with desperate longing, but but you can't force it. You can't force it along other than slowly plotting. I love, you said somewhere in I think it's in your planning class about those times of, especially when you have little kids, and work has to start small. And that part of your journey was just opening up the door and saying, welcome, God, or something like that. Like opening it, getting coffee in the morning, you open up the door and you say, welcome. And for me, I think I have a lot of little tiny things like that have grown into bigger practices, but especially during these past few years. And it reminds me of when our children were smaller, that the smallest inner work practices are sometimes the most powerful. And it's that, again, that turning your head to the left or the right. For me, it's walking outside at night and I look up and I see the stars, and I'm going to have one of three reactions. I'm going to just like burst out crying because I've been holding my entire day in, or I'm going to gasp in awe that there are stars outside and that the world is turning, literally it's spinning on its axis. I'm just in awe of the majesty of it all. Or there's various other things that'll happen, but that just the act of walking outside, turning my head up to the stars and seeing them and breathing, my breath changes, like you were saying, like just automatically my breath changes. And I think that finding tiny little things that you can do every day, there's something that you already do that makes you happy. There's already something that you're doing that you love, that you forget to do, or that you're too busy to do. It doesn't have to be, doesn't need to start with something like you're saying, I'm going to do this big change. No, it's just something that's 2 degrees or 3 degrees to the left or the right of something that you're already doing. That brings you joy, that brings you starting to look for those things that bring you that breath. What brings you breath? Is it making a cup of coffee in the morning and just taking, instead of 1 minute to smell it, just stopping right there and saying, how am I doing today? Are you okay?
Yes. Yeah. Just that little check-in. That was my inner work in the beginning. And I didn't even call it as much. Right. But I remember one day realizing, oh, this is my inner work practice, where every morning I would take my mug of tea and close my eyes and feel the warmth and say a poem recite to myself just a poem that I had learned by heart. And it's called Inner Quiet. It's a beautiful poem. We'll put a link to it in the show notes, but so simple, right? It was so simple. And so it's funny that I had this whole inner work had to be big and hard. And I, felt like, but I don't really have time for that. I don't know how to do it, all those things. So then that kept me from recognizing the things so long. Yeah, the inner work practices that I was doing. And so in retrospect, I think it really starts even before the actual practices. It just starts with this idea that you were alluding to, which is, to me, self-compassion, just recognizing that tenderness, that I'm okay exactly as I am.
Oh my gosh, you can't be anybody else, right?
Yeah.
And be a better you. Don't try and be somebody else. Just be a little bit better of a you. Yeah,
I love that 3 degrees, 2 to 3 degrees. So helpful. Yeah.
Because you're never far. I don't think we're ever far from grace. We're never far from tenderness. Sometimes we just need that reminder. And that's what practices are for. That's what the inner work practices are for. It's just a reminder of a gentle nudge towards yourself. gentle nudge towards God, a gentle nudge towards, smiling at your children and giving them a hug, or like whatever that thing is that you need, whatever creates that tenderness, whatever creates the compassion, whatever creates slowing down, whatever creates allowing, whatever creates staying connected and just being okay, and like you're saying, that turning that kind voice to yourself and saying, observing what's going on inside.
Yeah, because I think in the beginning, I felt like I didn't even deserve, right, to take the time. And then, I that sort of morphed into, well, I just don't have the time. And then it became, oh, I'm worthy of the time, right? So it changed through the years, but it's so interesting to look back because that doesn't necessarily mean that I have this huge inner work practice of hours every day now. Right. No, it's very much, it's ever changing. Things fall off for periods of time and I circle back to them. A couple of my favorites are, this morning prayer, and I love combining prayer or mantra with some action. So that's funny now. I didn't even realize that, because like holding my mug of tea, like I think I need the senses involved, right? Or physically going and opening the door for God. I would just open the door and say, "Good morning, God. Come on in." Yeah. That was my thing.
It's so great. And so for me, I couldn't even sit with myself for 20 minutes. I couldn't even imagine, like you're saying, not even deserving it. Like I couldn't even stand to, like, it sounds kind of harsh, but that I didn't know how to sit with all of my feelings or my thoughts or my emotions or any of those things. So I had to start with like tiny little 2 minutes at a time, of sitting with myself and observing myself and my thoughts. And then it grew to 5 minutes and sometimes for 20 minutes. And those 20 minutes, when I, like some things have grown into 20-minute practices, but I don't do them all the time. Or I might get in a jig and I'll do this particular thing for 6 weeks. I take baths in the morning a lot outside before it's light, because I find that it's easier for me to connect with myself when I can see the stars or the clouds or have some sense of peace in the world. Inside of these little boxes of houses, for me, for some reason, doesn't make a lot of sense, my place in the world. It feels disconnected for me. And so like being outside or being at the beach or being in nature for a lot works, but I only do that for 6 weeks at a time. And then I'll walk for 6 weeks at that same time in the morning at 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. And then I'll take another 6 weeks and I will sleep in, because that's what I need for those 6 weeks. I think there is a small amount of like self-care and listening that once you get so rigid and try and control that thing, you've lost all the magic. I mean, the magic is completely gone, and you need time to rest, to integrate those things that you've learned about yourself or that you've learned about God, depending on which way you're turning your head, for those particular times. And I think that you start to find a rhythm of turning towards yourself, turning towards God, and then resting and integrating what you've learned. And I don't think that can be survived. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And, we giving ourselves, the more we practice this, let me say it this way, the more we practice this, I think the more we recognize what it is that we need at this time, because it does change so much, and so I think oftentimes when things begin to fall away, my immediate response anyway is that I have to try harder to make it happen, right? Instead of allowing let it go for a while and then come back to it.
Or have a 6-week practice where you sit for 5 minutes in silence while it figures itself out, and you make space for it. It's like those great effective habit books that people talk about. It's not about getting to the gym for an hour every day. Sometimes it's about putting on your shoes at that time that you plan to go to the gym 6 weeks from now. And that every day at 4:00, you put on your sneakers. You don't have to go to the gym, and then you put on your sneakers and you go to the door, and you put on your sneakers and you go to the door and you get in the car. Those things can be progressive, because just starting out with exercising for an hour, if you haven't ever done that before, is overwhelming. The same thing with inner work. The same thing at looking at yourself with, observing yourself with brutal honesty is terrifying. Observe God with, and the majesty that is this world that surrounds us is terrifying if you've never done it. 10 seconds is really good for, a good place to start. 10 seconds and opening up the door. That's the starting of a bath for yourself. That's making a cup of hot tea and saying, I'm going to little bit of space to allow for whatever is in my life. And that's going to be different for you. It's going to be different for me. It's going to be different from every single person. And so it's just exciting to start that adventure. It's a beautiful adventure, a worthy endeavor to start upon.
Worthy endeavor. Okay. So how do you think inner work has changed you over the years?
Well, I think that I can look in the mirror, my internal mirror, not the actual mirror, with a lot more clarity, and a lot more honesty. I think that I have more space for the awkward reality of myself, the awkward reality of living this life and my family. I have more space for what is actually so right now versus what I thought it was going to be, or what I feel like I need to tort it into being. I think that what is good enough. What is beautiful. And that, I've learned on just how to slow down, to hear my own heartbeat, to hear the heartbeat of the people around me, and to see them and value them, and not as what I want them or need them to be. Being able to observe.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
Being able to observe.
Observe what's so. Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, it's similar. I think I would describe it as inner work has given me more of myself, right?
Absolutely.
It's like, I get to grow into the meest me there is, right? This is what I get to do. And it's so joyful, and it has given me the ability to also laugh at myself, not from a self-deprecating kind of place, but from the place of very lovingly, like, that is just so goofy, or that is just so, whatever. Like to be able to say, this is how I respond. I respond this way. When somebody doesn't listen to me, I get really irritated. Those kinds of things, like, yep, that's me.
Yeah. And it's beautiful, and it's perfect. If you were looking at your children, right, and they said the thing, or I know I look at my children and I say, if they said the things to themselves that I say to myself, I don't know what I'd do. But if you look at your children, if they said the things that you say to yourself, you say, oh, honey, hi, I see you and you're okay. And I think that being able to turn that voice towards ourselves and say, hey, I see you and you're okay. And it makes sense. It makes sense that you feel that way. Oh, it makes sense that you'd respond that way. Oh, it makes sense. I think that inner work has given me that voice, that real strong heart voice of love, of compassion and tenderness and thoughtfulness. And it's given me the space to be the parent for myself first, and then for my children. And I think that that's the goal, right? Is to be a better parent, right? And to do our best, but we have to give that to ourselves first. And I find that inner work is really at least half reparenting myself,
Yeah. I love that. Parenting ourselves. That is a beautiful way to describe it, because, I too didn't have the models. I didn't have the parenting models at all. And I felt so inadequate. And then to be able, I think, to grow as a person and as a parent, it almost needs to happen in parallel with some love and tenderness, right? It's very hard to grow if there isn't that love and care. And so starting with self-compassion, as I said before, I think is something I'm so grateful for.
Yeah, getting a chance to nourish ourselves, and teaching our children that it's okay to nourish themselves now. It's okay for them to start practice now. It's okay for them to see us struggling and striving and endeavoring, and to continuing to shine a light back towards ourselves and say, it's all right. You're doing great. You're trying so hard. You're being so brave, so courageous, It's really, really good.
Really, really good. So let's just close. We've mentioned a few just in throughout the conversation, but I would just love for us to, if we have any more ideas, do you have any more suggestions that you would give to homeschooling parents for where to start if they're feeling like, this kind of inner work thing, parenting myself, nurturing myself, shining the light, inward where I don't tend to look very often. What suggestions would you have?
So one of my favorite painters, Mark Rothko, has a very small quote that I really like a lot. And it says, silence is just so accurate. And I think that taking the time to be silent, taking the time to either look at the moon or the stars, taking the time to read a poem, taking the time to take a bath, if that's your thing, like finding 5 small things that are your tiny little things. I think yes, that would be what I would suggest, is to find 5 small things that you love, very, very small, and make 5 minutes a day for one of those things. And you can rotate and find out what works. Play around with it. Have so much fun. It could be listening to a podcast or listening to your favorite song and say, I love this composer. I'm going to listen to them and I'm going to make that a priority today. It's a little different than self-care. I think that self-care is an important component of it, but just taking a few minutes to do something that brings you joy, that returns you to self or turns you towards God, and start your journey there and see what grows from that.
Oh, I just love it. And for me, I would combine, pick 5 tiny little things and pick one to do and light a candle while you do it.
Amen. Light all the candles. Yes.
All the candles.
For journey, you need a little bit of light and a little bit of hope. And it could be a real candle or it could be texting a friend, and the light comes from all of the funniest places.
Yes, so true. So I have a poem that just surfaced at the top of the paper pile this morning and was calling to me. So I thought this would be a great thing to share as we wrap up here. So I'm going to read this poem. Mm-hmm. It's called Hold Out Your Hand by Julia Fehrenbacher. And here we go. Let's forget about the world for a while, fall back and back into the hush and holy of now. Are you listening? This breath invites you to write the first word of your new story. Your new story begins with this: you matter. You are needed. Empty and naked, willing to say yes and yes and yes. Do you see the sun shines day after day, whether you have faith or not? The sparrows continue to sing their song, even when you forget to sing yours. Stop asking, am I good enough? Ask only, am I showing up with love? Life is not a straight line. It's a downpour of gifts. Please hold out your hand.
Hand on my heart.
such a wonderful conversation. And I just want to invite our dear listeners, if you are interested in inner work and these kinds of conversations, I lead an inner work journey every spring. We're starting this year, 2022, on the equinox. And it's a 3-week journey this year focusing on self-compassion, self-talk, the way we talk to ourselves, and self-preservation. And a wonderful new component this year is that Eshanne is, as a bonus, going to lead some, after the 3-week journey, lead some additional conversations, just create some space for continuing to talk about what inner work is and how your practice is going and that kind of thing. So I'm really looking forward to that. If you want to join in, you can go to artofhomeschooling.com/innerworkjourney. And don't forget to follow Eshanne over on Instagram, and you can find her at Eshanne, and that's spelled Eshanne. So I just want to thank you so, so much, my friend. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I could talk to you about this every day, I think.
Right, wouldn't that be nice? Thanks for having me, Jean, and having this conversation, and really encouraging, hopefully, I hope it encourages others to have this conversation with themselves and with their friends and with one of us,
Wonderful.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks so much. See you all next time. That's all for today, my friend. But here's what I want you to remember. Rather than perfection, let's focus on connection. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Art of Homeschooling podcast.